In this video, you will learn non-verbal reasoning type 1, find the odd one out. Welcome to another video. If this is your first time here and you want to master 11 plus exam techniques to land in your dream grammar school, start right now by subscribing and clicking on the bell so you don't miss anything. Before we start into these questions, let's first look at snaps. So snaps is S-N-A-P-S-S. S stands for shape. One shape might be different to the others. N stands for number. The number of shapes or the number of sides in a shape could be different. A stands for angle. The angle of a shape might be different, reflection or its rotation. P, the position of a shape might be different. S is size. The size of a shape could be different. And finally, S is shading. The shading or a color of a shape could be different. Since we now know what snaps is, let's look at our first example. So let's look at this example. In this example, we have 5 options, A, B, C, D, and E, and 4 of the options are related to each other, but one of them is different. Our job is to find the different one, which will be the odd one out. So let's use snaps to find that answer. So snap stands for shapes, number, angle, position, size, and shading. Let's first use shapes. All of the options above have the same shape, so we cannot use shapes. Let's move on to number. All of the options above have 2 shapes. This means we cannot use number either. So let's go on to angle. In terms of angle, option A, both of the shapes point in the same direction. In option B, they point in the opposite direction. In option C, they point in the opposite direction. And in option D, they once again point in the opposite direction. And finally, in option E, they point in the opposite direction. This means our odd one out for this example is going to be A, because only in A we have both the shapes that point in the same direction. However, for the rest, they all point in the opposite direction. So we can safely say our answer to this question is A. So I hope you guys understood everything so far. Now, let's go on to the next one. For this example, using snaps, we're going to first compare the shapes. So in all of the options above, we can say that A, B, C, D, and E, they all contain a plus. So B, C, D, and E. And also, they all contain a diamond. A contains 1, B, C, D contains, and E contains a diamond as well. So all of them contain a diamond. But all of the options, except for B, they all contain a circle. So A contains a circle, C contains 1, D contains a circle, and E contains a circle. But in B, however, instead of circle, it has been replaced with a semicircle. So since a semicircle is not a circle, this means our answer is for this question is B, because B is the odd one out. So I hope you guys understood everything so far. Now, let's go on to the next one. Let's look at this example, and let's use snaps to get our answer. So first thing we have is shapes. So all of the options above, they have different shapes, which means shape does not work. So we can cross it off. Let's move on to numbers. All of the options above, they have 2 shapes, a smaller shape in the middle and a larger shape outside. So this means number doesn't work either. So let's look at angle. All of the shapes above, they have different angles, so angle doesn't work. In terms of position, the position of the shape is the same, because if you look at the inner shape, it's always in the middle. So for A, B, C, D, and E, the inner shape is always in the middle. So we cannot use this as an option to find the odd one out. So let's move on to size. So in terms of size, all of the shapes, they have different sizes because they're all different shapes. So a triangle might be a different size to a pentagon, and it might be a different size to a circle. We cannot use the size as a way of getting the odd one out either. So let's move on to shading. So we're left with shading now. If you look at the patterns on A, B, C, and D, so the shading pattern is right in the middle. So if you look at that, all of the shading pattern is going diagonal. But if you look at option E, the shading pattern is going vertical, so up and down. This means E is the odd one out, since the shading pattern is different. I hope you guys understood this question. In this video, you will learn 11 plus non-verbal reasoning type 2, find the figure like others. Welcome to another video. If this is your first time here and you want to master 11 plus exam techniques to land in your dream grammar school, start right now by subscribing and clicking on the bell so you don't miss anything. Before we start into the questions, let's first look at SNAPs. S-N-A-P-S-S. S stands for shapes. So what shapes are there and how are they similar to each other? N stands for number, the number of shapes, the number of lines, or the number of sides in a shape. A stands for angle, the rotation or reflection of a shape. P stands for position, the position of an element, such as arrows and lines. S stands for size, the shapes that get larger or smaller in size. And S stands for shading, the shading pattern or color of a shape. Since we now know what SNAPs is, let's move on to our first question. In this question, we have 2 shapes on the left and 5 shapes on the right, which form the multiple choice. The 2 shapes on the left, they have a similarity. Our job is to find the similarity and then pick an option from the multiple choice which also shares the same similarity. So let's get started with this question. Using SNAPs, we're going to first look at the shapes. So if you look at the shapes in both on the left hand side, so the oblong and the triangle, they're both the same because they have an outer shape and they have an inner shape, and both the outer and the inner shape, they are the same. So this means in terms of shape, we must have the same shape, both the outer one and the inner one. So let's go on to number now. So in terms of number, we have our outer shape and the inner shape, which totals to 2. So this means our answer must have 2 shapes. So we must have the same shapes and there must be 2 of them. So let's look at our options. We have A, B, C, D, and E. Let's start with A. So in terms of A, we have a square and we have a circle. A square and a circle, they're not the same, so A will not work. Let's move on to B. So in this, we have a square and a pentagon. Despite having 2 shapes, they're not the same, so B doesn't work either. So let's move on to C. So in terms of C, we have 2 shapes once again. We have an inner one and we have an outer one. So 2 shapes does work, but are they the same shape? No, they're not, because the inner shape is a triangle that is upside down and the outer shape is a diamond, so that does not work. Let's move on to D. So in terms of D, the outer shape is a circle, the inner shape is a circle. We have 2 shapes and they're the same, so that does work. So this means our answer could be D. Just to be sure, let's move on to E and let's see if E is wrong. Then we can certainly say D is right. So in terms of E, we have a pentagon and an oblong in the middle. They're not the same, so E doesn't work. This means our answer is D. So our answer to this question is D. So I hope you guys understood everything so far. Now let's go on to the next one. Let's look at this example and let's use SNAPs to help us. First thing we will have to look is shapes. In terms of shapes, we have a star and we have a square. So let's write this down. So we have 1 square and we have 1 star. So these are the shapes that we have. Let's move on to number now. We have 2 shapes. We have 1 star and 1 square. So we can write times 2. Then let's go on to angle. In terms of angle, we have no angle because there is no reflection or there is no rotation. So that means angle does not work, so we can cross off angle. So let's move on to position. So in terms of position, if you look at where the star is, it's overlapping the square and it's over the square. It's not beneath the square, it's on top of the square. So the star is on top of the square. This means we can basically eliminate any of the options in which the star is beneath the square. A, we can eliminate because the star is beneath the square. B, we can eliminate, star is once again underneath the square. C, we can also eliminate, which means we're left with D and E. So let's eliminate these now. A, B, and C. So these are eliminated, so we're left with D and E. So far, position has worked. Let's move on to size. In terms of size, they're all the same sizes, so it doesn't really work either, so we can cross off the size. So let's move on to our final option, which is shading. In terms of shading, if you look at the square, it has a diagonal pattern, so it's hatched and has a diagonal pattern. So in terms of the star, it is blank. But if you look in D, the star is shaded grey. This means D does not work. So we're left with our answer, which is E. So the answer to this question is C. So I hope you guys understood everything so far. Now let's go on to the next one. So let's look at this example. In this example, you guys may notice that something a bit different, and it is the number of shapes before the line. So right here. So we have 3 shapes on the left hand side. So normally we only have 2, but in this case we have 3. But other than that, everything is the same. So let's do the same thing. So let's first look at shapes because it's part of SNAPs. In terms of shapes, we have rectangles. Now let's move on to the next one. In terms of number, we have 2 rectangles. So we have 1, 2, 1, 2, and 1, 2. So we have 2 rectangles in every shape. So we can write it 2. And let's cross off all the options that has more than 2 rectangles or less than 2 rectangles. So in our case, B has more than 2 rectangles, C and E, they also have more than 2 rectangles. So we are left with A and D. So let's move on to angle now. In terms of angle, they're all arranged in a random angle, so we cannot really find a correlation between that, so angle does not work either. Let's move on to position. In terms of position, they're all placed randomly in random places. So position, we can't really use it to find the answer, so position doesn't work either. Let's move on to size. In terms of size, all the rectangles, they're the same size. So size doesn't work either, and we can't really find anything to use with size. We're left with shading. In terms of shading, if you guys notice, the 2 rectangles that we have, they have different shading. So for example, here we have a hatched pattern, and the other one we have a spotted pattern. Here we have one filled in black and one filled in grey, one that is left blank and one that has a stripy pattern. So this means they cannot have the same pattern, they must have 2 different patterns. So for example, we have stripe and white. So this means it automatically rules out A because both of the pattern is stripy. So A does not work. So let's move on to D. Let's see if it does work, and D does work because we have a spotted pattern and we have a blank. So this means our answer to this question is D. In this video, you will learn 11 plus non-verbal reasoning type 3. Complete the series. Welcome to another video. If this is your first time here and you want to master 11 plus exam techniques to land in your dream grammar school, start right now by subscribing and clicking on the bell so you don't miss anything. Before we start the questions, let's first look at snaps. S stands for shape. Are the shapes the same or different? N stands for number. How many of the same shapes are there? A stands for angle. At which angle is the shape rotated? P stands for position. How does the position of a shape change? S stands for size. Does the size of a shape change? And finally, S stands for shading. Does the shading pattern or the color of a shape change? In the question we have right here, there is a series, and this series follows a pattern. And we will have to find the pattern, and once the pattern is found, we need to apply the pattern to get our answer. So let's get started with this question. For this example, we're going to once again use snaps. So firstly, we are going to look at the shapes. In terms of the shapes, we have a diamond and we have a circle, and no new shapes are introduced. That means it will not work. So shapes does not work, and we can cross it off. Let's move on to number. In terms of number, we have the same number of shapes for all of them, which is 2. We have one circle and one diamond, and this means no new shapes are introduced and number doesn't increase or decrease. So this means number doesn't work either since nothing changes. In terms of angle, there is no angle because none of the shapes are rotated. For example, this diamond is not rotated to become this diamond, and this circle has not been rotated to become this circle. Since nothing has been rotated, angle doesn't work either. In terms of position, if you look at the black circle, it moves 1 position every time, clockwise. So from here, it moves up to come here, and then from here, it moves to the right, and then in the third diagram, it moves down. So if it continues like this, in the fourth diagram, it must go to the left. So this means on the next diagram, our circle must be to the bottom left corner. So we can cross off any of the options in which the circle is not at the bottom left corner. For example, A, C, and D. Only B and E, they have the circle in the bottom left corner. So this means position works. So let's move on to size. In terms of size, the size changes for the diamond. So from being small, it gets large, and then small and large. If you continue the pattern, it must get smaller next time. Out of B and E, which one of the diamond is smallest? It's obviously E. This means our answer to this question is E. So I hope you guys understood everything so far. Now let's go on to the next one. For this example, we're going to use snaps to help us. First thing we are going to look at is going to be shapes. In terms of shapes, we have a square and we have a line. And this means no new shapes are introduced, so shapes does not work, and you can cross it off. So shapes does not work. Let's move on to number. In terms of number, we have 2 shapes. We have a square and a line, and the number doesn't change either throughout. So this means number doesn't work either, and we can cross it off. So let's move on to angle now. In terms of angle, there is no angle because there is no rotation. For example, this square hasn't been rotated to become this square, and this line hasn't been rotated to become this line. So angle doesn't work either, and we can cross it off. So let's move on to position. In terms of position, if you look at the line, it changes position every time. So from over to the top left, it moves to the top right, and then it moves to the bottom right, moves to the bottom left. If it continues like this, it should move to the top left. So right here. So this means we're going to cross off all of the options in which the line is not at the top left. So let's cross off A, we can cross off B, and we can cross off E. So we are left with C and D. So the next thing we're going to look at is going to be size, but before we do that, let's take position. So in terms of size, we have the shapes going like this. So from square, it goes to a smaller one, goes smaller and smaller. So the square gets smaller and smaller. So if it continues like this square would only get smaller. The only options we have are C and D. And if you look at C, the square is very large. It's larger than this one. So that means C will not work and we can cross it off. This means we are only left with one of the option, which is D. So this means our answer to this question is D. In this video, you will learn non-verbal reasoning type 4, complete the grid. Welcome to another video. If this is your first time here and you want to master 11 plus exam techniques to land in your dream grammar school, start right now by subscribing and clicking on the bell so you don't miss anything. In this type of question, we have a larger square, and inside this larger square, we have a smaller square which has been left blank. So our job is to find the shape that fits the best in this square from the multiple choice. For this example, let's start off by looking at the similarities and the differences between the top two shapes. So in terms of the similarities, they're both the same shape, so that's the similarity. And in terms of differences, the angle is a different thing. So if you look at the shape on the left, it has been rotated 180 degrees to get to the shape on the right. So this means in terms of angle, it is 180 degrees. So for our question, this shape must be rotated 180 degrees to get our answer. So out of A, B, C, D, and E, let's cross off any of the options in which this shape has not been rotated 180 degrees. So we can cross off D and E because they're not rotated at all. Let's move on to the next difference, which is the shading pattern. In terms of shading, the shape on the left is left blank, but the shape on the right is hatched. So this means out of A, B, and C, which one of these pattern is closest to this one? In other words, which one of these pattern is hatched? And it's obviously B. B has a hatched pattern, so that means D is our answer. I hope you guys understood everything so far. Now, let's go on to the next one. For this example, let's start by comparing the top two shapes. So let's look at the similarities and the differences. In terms of the similarities, they're both the same shape. Let's move on to differences. In terms of differences, on the left-hand side shape, there's only one hatched pattern. On the right-hand side shape, we have two hatched. This means in terms of differences, we have two hatched shapes. So these are the differences. Now let's do the same thing. So for this example, we must have two of the same hatched pattern. So out of A, B, C, D, and E, which one of these have two hatched patterns? We can straight away remove D because it has a spotted pattern. So let's just remove D. That means we're left with A, B, C, and E. Out of these four, only A has two hatched pentagons. So this means our answer to this question is A. Let's have a look at this example, and in this example, you might notice that the shape is a bit larger. We have a 3x3 grid right now. So let's use shapes first. In terms of shapes, if you notice the two left-hand side shapes, so this one and this one, you add these two to make the shape on the right. And let's look at the second row. In terms of the second row, you add this shape and this shape to make the shape on the right. So if this carries on like this, we'll have to add these two shapes to give us our answer. So this means the two left shapes have been joined up to make the shape on the right. So in terms of number, we don't have any number because the number of shapes on one grid stays the same. Let's move on to angle. In terms of angle, there is no angle since none of the shapes are rotated. Let's move on to position now. In terms of position, even if you do find something about position, if you look at the multiple choice, all the shapes, they're at the same position in each grid. Let's move on to size. They're all the same sizes, so that doesn't work. And in terms of shading, if you look at the shading pattern, it's black and white. So if you look at C, D, and E, they have different shaded patterns. C has a dotted pattern, D has a dotted one, and E has a hatched pattern. So this means C, D, and E, we can cross them off since they don't work. So we're left with A and B. In terms of A and B, once again, if you look at the shading pattern, you might notice that when adding these two shapes, the shading pattern remains the same on the larger shape. For example, if the shape on the left is black and the shape on the right is white, the final shape has the black on the left and the white on the right. So in our case, the black is on the left and the white is on the right. So this means B has the white on the left and the black on the right. So B is not right. So this means we're left with A. Let's check if A is right. A has the black on the left and the white on the right. So this means our answer for this question is A. So I hope you guys understood everything. In this video, you will learn 11 plus non-verbal reasoning type 5, complete the pair. Welcome to another video. If this is your first time here and you want to master 11 plus exam techniques to land in your dream grammar school, start right now by subscribing and clicking on the bell so you don't miss anything. Before we start the question, let's have a look at snaps. S stands for shape. How does the shape change? N stands for number. Does the number of sides or the number of shape changes? A stands for angle. If a shape rotates, then by how many degrees does it rotate? P stands for position. Does the position of a shape change? S stands for size. Does the size of a shape change? S stands for shading. Does the color or the shading pattern changes? Since we now know what snaps is, let's move on to our first question. Let's have a look at this example, and in this example, we're going to use snaps to help us. So first thing we're going to look at is going to be shapes. In terms of shapes, the shapes stay the same, so we can cross off shapes. Let's move on to number. In terms of number, the number of shapes stays the same as well, so cross out 1, 2. Let's move on to angle. So in angle, if you look at the shape on the left, it rotates 90 degrees clockwise to become the shape on the right. So this means this shape we have right here must rotate 90 degrees clockwise to become our answer. So we can already cross off E because it has not been rotated at all, and we can put a tick next to angle. Let's move on to position. In terms of position, if you have a look at the tiny circle we have right here, it is towards the back of this triangle, but in the other shape, it moves to the front. So this means this diamond at the front must move to the back. So we can cross off A because the diamond's at the front, and we can cross off D for the same reason. So we are left with B and C. And let's put a tick next to position before we go on to size. In terms of size, the size stays the same, so cross off size because it will not work. Let's move to shading. In terms of shading, if you look at the shading pattern, when it's black on the outside and white in the inside, on the next shape it becomes white on the outside and black in the inside. They basically swap. So right here we have white in the outside and black in the inside. So this means we must have black on the outside and white in the inside. So out of B and C, which one of these have black on the outside and white in the inside? Is obviously B. So we can cross off C, and so our answer to this question is going to be B. So I hope you guys understood everything. Let's have a look at this example, and for this example, we're going to use snaps to help us. First thing we're going to look at is going to be shapes. In terms of shapes, we cannot find a correlation by simply looking at both of the shapes, so we're going to cross shapes out. Let's move on to number. In terms of number, we can see that there's one less number of circles as the number of sides in a shape. So here we have a pentagon which has 5 sides, but over here we have 4 small circles. So this means you must have one less amount of small circles. Over here we have an octagon which has 8 sides, which means we will have 7 small circles. We can straight away cross off D and E because they only have 6. Let's move on to angle now, but before we do that, let's put a tick next to number and let's go on to angle. In terms of angle, none of the shapes are rotated, so we can cross off angle. Let's move on to position. In terms of position, they're all at random position, so that won't really help us to find the answer. And let's put a cross next to position, and let's move on to size. In terms of size, they're all different sizes, so once again, that won't help us, so let's cross it off. Let's move on to shading. In terms of shading, the shading pattern is basically what is in the middle. So in terms of here, we have a pentagon and we have a black circle in the middle. So this means for the final shape, the shading pattern is black. So over here, we have a grey circle in the middle which means the shading pattern for the answer must be grey. So out of A, B, and C, which one of this is grey? And it's obviously A. So before we do that, let's cross off B and C. So our answer for this question is A. I hope you guys understood everything. In this video, you will learn 11 plus non-verbal reasoning type 6, crack the vertical code. Welcome to another video. If this is your first time here and you want to master 11 plus exam techniques to land in your dream grammar school, start right now by subscribing and clicking on the bell so you don't miss anything. Let's have a look at this example, and in this example we have 3 shapes and 3 two-letter codes. Our job is to find what each of these letters mean, and once we've done that, we can use it to find the code for the shape on the right. So let's look at the first letter for each of the code, which is K, S, and M. As you guys could see, all 3 of these letters are different, so this means there is something different about all 3 of these shapes, and it is obviously the shape itself. The first shape we have a circle, the second shape we have a star, and on the third shape we have a pentagon. The shape on the right is a star, so this means it must start with an S, and we can write it down. So as a result, we can cross off C, D, and E because they don't start with an S. So we're now left with A and B. Let's have a look at the second letter. The second letter is F, F, and P. As you guys could see, we have same letter repeating twice. So this means we have something in common between the circle and the star, and it is obviously the number of dots. So in the circle we have 3 dots, and in the star we also have 3 dots. So this means F has 3 dots, and in this shape P means you have 4 dots. The shape on the right we have 4 dots, so this means our second letter must be P, and we can write it down. SF we can cross it off because it doesn't have a P, and we are left with B, so our answer to this question is B. I hope you guys understood everything so far. Now let's go on to the next one. Let's have a look at this example, and in this example, rather than 2-letter codes, we have 3-letter codes. Other than that, we're going to do the same thing for this question. Let's have a look at the first letter, which is Y, X, and X. As you guys could see, we have both of the same letter. This means that there's something common between these 2 shapes. The only thing that's common is the shape itself. They're both pentagons. So this means X must mean pentagon and Y must mean a diamond. Over here, on the right hand side, we have a diamond. So this means our shape must start with the Y. And we can write the Y, so we can cross off the likes of C and D since they start with an X, not with a Y. Let's move on to the second letter, which is R, and Q. We have 2 R's. This means there's something common between these 2 shapes. The only thing that's common between these 2 shapes is the fact that they have an outer shape and an inner shape. And this is the same for both of them. This means that if you have an outer and an inner shape, the middle letter is an R. But if you only have one shape, the middle letter is a Q. Over here on the right, we only have one shape, so the middle letter is going to be a Q, and we can write that above the diamond. So this means we can cross off the likes of A because it has YR, not YQ. So we are left with B and E. Let's move on to the third letter, which is U, T, and O. For this, all 3 of them are different. So as you guys could see, the only thing that's different between all of them is the color. In the first one, we have a black in the inside. In the second one, we have a dotted pattern in the inside. In the third one, we have a blank in the inside, but on the shape on the right side, we have dotted pattern in the inside. So this means the last letter must be a T, and we can write that above the Y and the Q to give us an answer of YQT. So as a result, we can cross off E and circle B, so our answer to this question is B. I hope you guys understood everything. In this video, you will learn 11 plus non-verbal reasoning type 7, crack the horizontal code. Welcome to another video. If this is your first time here and you want to master 11 plus exam techniques to land in your dream grammar school, start right now by subscribing and clicking on the bell so you don't miss anything. Let's have a look at this question, and in this example we have 4 shapes each of them with their own 2-letter codes, and this is the same for all of the shapes. So our job is to find what each of these letters mean, and once we've done that, we'll have to use it to find the code for the shape on the right. So let's have a look at this example, and let's start by looking at the top letters, which are Z, V, W, and Z. As you guys could see, we have both of the same letters that are appearing twice. So this means that there's something common between these two shapes. The only thing that we can find that is in common between these two shapes is the fact that they're both spotted. So the pattern for both of these shapes is spotted. So this means the top letter is for the pattern and Z means it's spotted. Let's have a look at the shape on the right, which we'll have to work out. So in this shape, we have a black pattern, so it's completely shaded in black. If you look over here, which also has a black pattern, the top letter is a V. So this means the top letter for our question must be a V, and we can write it down. So as a result, we could cross off B and E because they start with a Z and a W, not a V. Let's move on to the second letter, which is K, N, H, and L. As you guys could see, none of these letters are the same, so this means that there's something different between all 4 shapes. The only thing that's different between all 4 shapes is the fact that they're all pointing in different directions. So in the first one, the arrow is pointing towards the right. The second, arrow is pointing upwards. In the third, the arrow is pointing towards the left. In the fourth, the arrow is pointing down. So this means if we look at the shape on the right that we have, the arrow is pointing towards the left. So if when the arrow is pointing towards the left, the bottom letter is obviously H. So this means our answer for this question is VH. So as a result, we can cross off A and D, and we're left with C. So our answer to this question is C. I hope you guys understood everything so far. Now, let's go on to the next one. Let's have a look at this example. And in this example, let's do the same thing as we did before in the previous examples. Let's start by looking at the first letters, which are O, T, R, T. As you guys could see, we have both of the letters appearing twice. So this means that there's something common between these two shapes. The only thing that we can find in common is obviously the way in which the shapes are drawn. They're both dotted. So this means the top letters for all of them stands for the way in which the shape is drawn. So let's have a look at the shape on the right. The shape on the right is dashed. So here we have a dashed shape, and for it we have R as a first letter. Since our shape is dashed, it must mean that R must be our first letter, and we can write that down. So let's write it down. As a result, R is our first letter. We can cross off C, D, and E because they start with the T, O, and T, not with an R. So we're left with A and B. Now, let's look at our second letters, which are A, G, B, A. As you guys could see, A, G, B, A, we have 2 of the same letters appearing again, which are A's. So this means that there's something common between these two shapes. The only thing that's common between these two shapes is the fact that they both have a black circle. Both of them have a black circle. So this means the color of the circle is the bottom letter. So the color of a circle we have right here is gray. For gray, the bottom letter is a G. So this means our answer for this question is RG. And let's cross off any of the options in which RG is not there. So let's cross off B because it is RA. So our answer to this question is A. In this video, you will learn 11 plus non-verbal reasoning type 9, hole punching part 1. Welcome to another video. If this is your first time here and you want to master 11 plus exam techniques to land in your dream grammar school, start right now by subscribing and clicking on the bell so you don't miss anything. Let's have a look at how the paper is folded at each of the figures. So let's start with the figure 1. In figure 1, the paper has been folded into half on the diagonal line. It has been folded along this line diagonally. So the paper has been folded like this. That's figure 1, and let's move to figure 2. In figure 2, if you're wondering what has been folded, to create this new thing we have on the paper, it is none other than the corner we have. So the bottom left corner we have over here has been folded right here. So all this means is that corner has been folded, and we can draw an arrow to show that. And finally, in the third figure, a hole has been punched in the top right-hand side of the paper. So now we know how the paper has been folded. Now let's unfold figure 3 to find our answer. So let's start by unfolding the corner we have right here. So this is the first thing we're going to unfold. And when we unfold it, we're going to get the corner back. And it's going to look like this. Because we're working from backwards, we're going to do each of the steps in the opposite direction. So that means we just do the second step first. So in the second step, we folded the corner, and because of that, when we're unfolding it, we unfolded the corner. That's all. Now let's move to figure 1. In figure 1, we folded the paper into half. Now let's unfold this paper and let's move that direction. So when you unfold the paper, you're going to get the whole paper once again, and it's going to be at a square shape once again. So it's going to look like this. And also, if you're wondering if you don't have any other holes in this region, well, since we have a hole here, and when you unfold this paper, you're going to get another hole right here. And let's draw it in just to be sure. So we have a hole right here. So we can see that we have 2 holes in our answer. So which means we can straight away cross off the likes of D and E because they all have 3 holes and not 2. We can also cross off C. In C, there's a hole next to the bottom right corner, even though in the actual answer there is no hole to the bottom right corner. So therefore we can also cross off C, and we're now left with A and B. So the only thing that's different between A and B is the gap between the circles. In both of these circles, they're next to the end of the paper, so next to the edge, and they also have a large gap between them. But over in B, there's a smaller gap between them, and they're towards the middle of the paper. They're nowhere near towards the end. So this means we can go ahead and cross off B, and we're now left with A. So let's check A just to be sure. They have a large gap between them, which is fine, and they're also next to the edge of the paper, which is also fine. So that means our answer to this question is A. I hope you guys understood everything so far. Now let's check if A is right by folding and punching the paper. Now let's take a paper, and we're going to do the first fold, which is to fold the paper along its diagonal line. So into half along its diagonal line. Now that's our first fold done. Next, we're going to do onto a second fold, which is basically to fold this corner we have right here on the left. So now let's fold this corner over to the right. And once you've done that, we've done both of the folds. All we have to do is to punch. So let's punch right here at the top right. And after punching it, we got a hole right here. Next, we'll have to unfold this paper to find our answer. So let's start by unfolding this corner. Then we're going to unfold the whole paper. And as you guys can see, we have 2 holes, which is the same number of holes as we have in our answer, and the holes are placed in the right position. So that means our answer to this question is A. In this video, you will learn 11 plus non-verbal reasoning type 9, hole punching part 2. Welcome to another video. If this is your first time here and you want to master 11 plus exam techniques to land in your dream grammar school, start right now by subscribing and clicking on the bell so you don't miss anything. Now let's have a look at this example. So let's start by seeing how the paper has been folded in each of the figures. So let's start with figure 1. In figure 1, if you notice, we have a fold right here. And the fold is none other than the right side portion of the paper. So the right side portion of the paper has been folded to give us the fold we have in figure 1. Now let's move to figure 2. In figure 2, if you're wondering how the paper has been folded, well, the paper has been folded along the center line horizontally. So it has been folded basically like this. So that's how the paper has been folded in figure 2. And finally, in figure 3, a hole has been punched on the right hand side. Since we now know how the paper has been folded in figure 1 and 2, let's unfold the paper in figure 3 to find our answer. So we're going to work our way backwards, so in the opposite direction. So let's start by unfolding the paper downwards. So in figure 2, we folded the paper halfway on a center line. Now we're going to unfold the paper halfway on its center line. So when we unfold the paper, you're going to get the paper looking like this. So it's going to look just like this, and also you're going to get a hole around this region. This is because you have a hole right here, and when you unfold the paper, you're going to get another one right here. Now we have unfolded the paper. The next thing we're going to do, we're going to unfold the paper in an even further way. So next we're going to unfold the right hand side portion of the paper. So in figure 1, we folded the right hand side portion. Now we're going to unfold it. And when you unfold it, the paper is going to look like this. So you're going to get the whole paper back and will look like this. And also when you unfold this, because you have 2 holes here, and when you unfold it, you're going to get another 2 holes right here. That means you're going to get one aligned with this hole and another one aligned with the bottom hole. So this means, as you guys could see, we have 4 holes. We have 1, 2, 3, and 4, which means we can go ahead and cross off A, because in A you only have 2, cross off C, in C you only have 3, and cross off D, because in D you also only have 3. Now we're left with B and E. If you pay close attention to the circles, in E there's a larger gap between both of the circles, so the gap between the circles is huge. But over in B, the gap between the circles is actually very small. And if you have a look at figure 3, the gap between the circles is also very small. But in E, the gap is very large, so therefore we can cross off E, and we're now left with B. So that means our answer to this question is B. Now let's check if B is right by folding and punching the paper. So let's take a paper first, and then we're going to do the first fold, which is to fold the right hand side portion of the paper. Now, after you've done the first fold, the next thing is to fold this paper along its halfway line, so along the horizontal line halfway. Now we've done our second fold as well. All that's remain is to punch the paper. So we're going to punch the paper right here. And then after punching the paper, now we can unfold this paper to find our answer. So we're going to unfold this into half, and then we can remove the portion we have on the right. And as you guys could see, we have 4 number of holes, and the holes are positioned in the right direction, just like in B. So that means our answer to this question is B. In this video, you will learn 11 plus nonverbal reasoning type 9, hole punching part 3. Welcome to another video. If this is your first time here and you want to master 11 plus exam techniques to land in your dream grammar school, start right now by subscribing and clicking on the bell so you don't miss anything. Let's have a look at this example, and for this example, let's start by having a look at how the paper has been folded in each of the figures. Let's start with figure 1. In figure 1, the paper has been folded along the horizontal line halfway. It's just been folded just like this. That's how the paper has been folded in figure 1, and let's move on to figure 2. In figure 2, this corner we have right here in figure 1 has been folded to give us figure 2. That's how the paper has been folded in figure 2, and we can move on to figure 3. In figure 3, this folded piece of paper we have right here in figure 2 has been folded to give us figure 3. And that's how the paper has been folded in each of the figures. So in figure 1, the paper has been folded halfway along the horizontal line, so along this line. In figure 2, the corner we have right here has been folded. And in figure 3, this folded piece of paper we have already has been once again folded to give us figure 3. And now in figure 4, a hole has been punched on the top left corner. So that's how the paper has been folded in each of the figures. Since we now know how the paper has been folded in each of the figures and where the hole has been punched in the final figure, now let's work our way backwards and let's unfold the paper in the opposite direction. So over here, if you notice figure 3, you can see that we have folded this piece of paper over here. And if you're wondering what it is none other than this piece of paper we have right here in figure 2, we folded that in figure 3. So all we're going to do, we're going to unfold that piece of paper. So when we unfold it, you're going to get the paper looking like this. So you unfold the piece of paper and it's going to look just like the one you have in figure 2. And as you guys could see, they're both very similar. Next, you may notice that we have a hole right here. Because you have a hole right here, when you flip this piece of paper, you're going to get another one over here. And we could draw that in as well. So after that, if you have a look at figure 2, this piece of corner we have right here in figure 1 has been folded in figure 2. So all that means is that we're going to unfold this piece of corner because we're working our way backwards. So when we unfold it, you're going to get the paper looking just like the one we have in figure 1. So right here. And also because you have a hole over here, when you unfold it, you're going to get another hole over here. And we can draw that one in as well. Now, let's have a look at figure 1. In figure 1, you can see that the paper has been folded in half along its horizontal line. And since we are working our way backwards, we're going to unfold the paper halfway along the horizontal line. And when you unfold it, you're going to get it back to its original shape, which is obviously a square. And also when you unfold it, you're going to get additional holes as well because you have 3 over here. And when you unfold these, when you flip them over, you're going to get another additional 3 right here. And we can draw this one right now. So we're going to get one here, another one here, and another one right here. So now we have 3 holes on both sides. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 6 holes, which means we can cross off C. In C, you only have 5 holes. So let's cross off C and let's move to B. In B, you only have 4 holes, which means you can also cross off B. And in E, if you notice, we have another set of 2 holes right here, even though there aren't any over here. But you don't have any holes at the top, even though there's actually holes at the top, but there's none over the side. Because the holes are placed in the wrong direction, there are no holes in the right place, so we can cross off E. So that means we're left with A and D. So in A and D, the only thing that's different about them is the difference between the holes. The gap between the holes is different. So in A, we have a smaller gap between them, but over in D, we have a larger gap between them. And in our answer, there's a smaller gap between the holes, which means we can go ahead and cross off D. So that means our answer to this question is A. Now let's check if A is right by folding and punching the paper. First, let's take a paper, and then we're going to fold the paper. So let's start by folding the paper horizontally along the half line. And then you're going to fold this corner of the paper towards the right. After folding this corner, we're going to fold this piece of paper towards the right. And finally, we're done with folding, and all we have to do is punch the paper over here. Now we have punched the paper right here. Now let's unfold the paper to see if we are right. So that's the first fold. And then we're going to unfold it like this. And then finally, we're going to unfold the whole lot. And as you guys could see, just like in the image, we have 6 holes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And also, they're positioned in the right place. So therefore, our answer to this question is A. In this video, you will learn 11 plus non-verbal reasoning type 10, merge shapes, part 1. Welcome to another video. If this is your first time here and you want to master 11 plus exam techniques to land in your dream grammar school, start right now by subscribing and clicking on the bell so you don't miss anything. Let's have a look at this example. And in this example, we have been given 2 shapes and we need to merge these 2 shapes, and we need to see which one of these options would look the most similar to how these 2 shapes would look like once they're merged. So let's have a look at shape 1. In shape 1, you have a circle at the top, a line coming downwards, and 2 lines towards the right. And then in shape 2, you have a square on the outside, a smaller square on the inside that has been shaded in black, and then you have 3 arrows. The arrow on the top is pointing towards the left, the arrow on the left is pointing downwards, and the arrow on the bottom is pointing towards the right. What this means is that if we find an option in both of these shapes are different, or one of these shapes are different, then we cross it off, because these shapes must be the same. By the way, these shapes can be rotated, but they cannot be reflected, or any of the features in the shape cannot be changed. So let's have a look at A. In A, let's start with shape 1. So we have the circle at the top, the line coming downwards, and 2 lines towards the right, just like shape 1. So therefore, shape 1 is fine. Let's move to shape 2. So we have the square on the outside, smaller square on the inside, but if you notice, the smaller square has not been shaded in black. Because it has not been shaded and left blank, even though it's actually meant to be shaded, we can go ahead and cross off A. Now, let's move to B. So let's have a look at shape 1. So we have the circle at the top, the line coming downwards, and the 2 lines towards the right. And it's just like shape 1, so shape 1 is fine, and let's move to shape 2. So we have the square on the outside, the square on the inside, and it has been shaded in black, so that's fine. And let's move into arrows now. So in terms of arrows, in the real one, we only have one arrow on the top, and it's pointing towards the left. But if you have a look in B, we have 2 arrows at the top, one pointing towards the left, and another one pointing towards the right. Because we have an extra arrow on the wrong side, we can go ahead and cross off B. So now let's move to C. Let's do the same thing once again. Let's start with shape 1. We have the circle at the top, line coming downwards, 2 lines towards the right, just like shape 1. So shape 1 is fine. Let's move into shape 2. We have the square on the outside, the square on the inside, and it has been shaded in black. And now let's move to arrows. So we have the arrow pointing towards the left on the top, just like over here. And then we have one pointing downwards, just like right here. But if you notice, we have another one pointing downwards on the right hand side. But we do not have any arrow on the right hand side over in shape 2. Because we have an arrow on the wrong side of the square, we can cross off C. So let's move into D. So let's start with shape 1. You have the circle at the top, line coming downwards, 2 lines towards the right, just like shape 1, and shape 1 is fine. Let's move into shape 2. Square on the outside, square on the inside, shaded in black, so that's also fine. Let's have a look at the direction of the arrows. We have an arrow at the top pointing towards the left, and then an arrow on the left pointing downwards, just like here, and then another arrow on the bottom pointing towards the right, just like here. And as you guys could see, in this shape, everything about the 2 shapes are the same. So in D, everything is same, but let's check E just to be sure. So let's have a look at shape 1, circle at the top, line coming downwards, 2 lines towards the right, but we only have 1 line towards the right. Because we're missing another line, so therefore we can cross off E. So this means our answer to this question is D. In this video, you will learn 11 plus non-verbal reasoning type 10, merge shapes. Welcome to another video. If this is your first time here and you want to master 11 plus exam techniques to land in your dream grammar school, start right now by subscribing and clicking on the bell so you don't miss anything. Now, let's have a look at this example. And in this example, we have 2 shapes. So let's start with shape 1 and shape 2. So in shape 1, we have a square on the outside and then a triangle in the inside that has been shaded in black. On top of this triangle, there is a stripy pattern. In shape 2, we have a horizontal line. On top of this horizontal line, there's a triangle attached to this line. And in this triangle, we have a hatched pattern. So let's have a look at A. In A, if we find either one of these shapes different when we have merged them, then we cross it off. So if you find in any of the options that either of these shapes or one of the shapes is different, we cross it off because we need the shapes to stay the same. The shapes can be rotated, but they cannot be reflected, nor any of the features inside the shape can be changed. So let's start with A. In A, let's start with shape 1. So we have the square on the outside, the triangle in the inside that has been shaded in black. On top of it, the stripy pattern. So we have everything in shape 1, and we can move into shape 2. In shape 2, we have the horizontal line, but if you notice, the triangle we have in shape 2 is pointing towards the right hand side. However, in A, the triangle is pointing downwards, and also this triangle is in the wrong position because this triangle is more towards the middle of the line, whereas this triangle is more towards the end of the line. Because the triangle is pointing towards the wrong direction and at the wrong place in the horizontal line, we can go ahead and cross off A. So let's move to B. So let's do the same thing with B. So in B, let's start with shape 1. We have the square, the triangle shaded in black, and the stripy pattern. Everything shape 1 is right there, so that's fine. Let's move to shape 2. So in terms of shape 2, we have the horizontal line just here, and also we have the triangle, and the hatched pattern is in the right direction. B seems to tick all of the category, but let's check the remaining ones just to be sure that B is our answer. So let's move into C and let's leave B for now. So in C, let's start by doing the same thing. Let's go with shape 1 first. So in terms of shape 1, we have the square on the outside, the triangle in the inside, and then the stripy pattern. Everything in shape 1 is the same, so therefore we can move into shape 2. So we have the line, and then we have the triangle, and the triangle is pointing towards the right direction. But if you notice the direction of the hatched lines, they're in the opposite direction, because over in shape 2, they're going from top left to bottom right, so in this direction. Over in C, they're going from bottom left to top right, over in this direction. Since both of these directions are opposite to each other, so they're different. So therefore, we can cross off C. So let's move into D. In D, let's start with shape 1. In terms of shape 1, we have the square, triangle shaded in black, and the stripy pattern. Everything is the same, and we can move into shape 2. In terms of shape 2, we have the horizontal line, and then we have the triangle. This triangle is pointing towards the right direction, and the hatched lines, the direction of them is also the same, just like in the shape 2. But the thing is different is the fact that the triangle is located in the wrong place. Because over in shape 2, the triangle is located towards the end of the line, but over in D, it's located towards the middle of the line. Because it's located at the wrong place, we can go ahead and cross off D, because it's located in the middle and not towards the end. So let's move into E, and in E, you can straight away see that the triangle is located in the wrong direction, just like in D. They're both in the same direction, which is not the same as shape 2. So therefore, we can go ahead and cross off E straight away. So that means we're left with B, so our answer to this question is also going to be B. In this video, you will learn 11 plus nonverbal reasoning type 11, figure rotation. Welcome to another video. If this is your first time here and you want to master 11 plus exam techniques to land in your dream grammar school, start right now by subscribing and clicking on the bell so you don't miss anything. Now let's have a look at this example. And in this example, we have a question figure, and this question figure can be rotated in any angle and can be rotated at any direction. It can be either rotated clockwise or it can be rotated anti-clockwise. So our job is to find which one of these options is a rotated form of the question figure. So let's start by finding the obvious errors first. So let's have a look at the question figure. In this question figure, we have 5 shapes. We have a larger square on the outside, and we have 4 smaller shapes on the inside. So we have a triangle, a circle, a star, and a pentagon. These are the 4 smaller shapes we have inside the square. So if we find any of these 4 shapes different, so if they're different color, or a new shape is introduced, or if they're pointing in the wrong direction, then we cross the option off. So let's start with A. In A, the triangle is pointing away from the star, and the pentagon is pointing away from the circle. But over in question figure, the triangle is pointing away from the star, which is right, but the pentagon is pointing towards the circle. Since the pentagon is pointing in the wrong direction, we can go ahead and cross off A. So let's move into B, and let's do the same thing once again. Triangle is pointing away from the star, which is right, because the triangle is pointing away from the star, and the pentagon is pointing towards the circle, just like here. So B is fine, and we can move into C. Triangle is pointing towards the star, but over in the question figure, the triangle is pointing away from the star. So therefore, we can also cross off C. So let's move to D. Let's do the same thing once again. The pentagon is pointing towards a circle, just like here. Pentagon pointing towards a circle. And the triangle is pointing away from the star, just like over here. Triangle is pointing away from the star. So D is also fine, and we can move into E. In terms of E, if you look at E, the triangle is pointing away from the star. Yup, just like over here. And the pentagon is pointing towards a circle, just like over here. So E is also fine. Out of the 5 options we started with, we managed to cross off A and C, so we're now left with B, D, and E. So once we manage to cross off the obvious errors, we can then rotate each of these options in our head. So let's start with B. In B, let's rotate B so that's at the same angle as the question figure. And once you do that, B is a mirror image of the question figure, because over in the question figure, we have the triangle and the star on the left-hand side, but over in B, they're on the right-hand side. Because in the wrong position, we can go ahead and cross off B. So let's move to D. In terms of D, let's do the same thing. Let's rotate D so it's at the same angle. And as you guys could see, this is also a mirror image, because over in this example, the circle and the pentagon in the question figure on the right-hand side. But over in D, they're on the left-hand side, because in the wrong position, we can go ahead and cross off D. So we're left with E, which means it must be our answer, but let's check. Let's rotate E, and when you rotate E, you can see they're all at the right place. The triangle's at the top left, circle at the top right, pentagon's at the bottom right, and the star is on the bottom left. Which means E is our answer. In this video, you will learn 11 plus nonverbal reasoning type 11, figure rotation. Welcome to another video. If this is your first time here and you want to master 11 plus exam techniques to land in your dream grammar school, start right now by subscribing and clicking on the bell so you don't miss anything. Now let's have a look at this example. And in this example, we have a question figure. And in this question figure, we have 3 shapes. We have a pentagon on the outside. Inside this pentagon, we have a square. And inside this square, we have an O shape. So these are the 3 shapes we have. And if you notice, a side of the square and a side of the pentagon, they're both parallel to each other. And also, on both of these parallel sides, you have an O shape. So what this means is that in any of the options, that one side of the square and one side of the pentagon are not parallel and there is not an O shape on the parallel side, then we cross the option off. So let's have a look at A. In A, you could see that none of the sides in the square are parallel to the pentagon, so therefore we can cross off A. So let's move to B. In terms of B, if you notice, we have a square and a pentagon, they're both parallel to each other, and we have the O shape on the parallel sides. So that's also fine, B is fine, and we can move on to C. In C, it's the same case, the square and the pentagon, both are parallel sides, that's fine, and also in this parallel side, you have an O shape, C is also fine, and you can move on to D. In D, it's the same case once again. You have 2 parallel sides and you have an O shape on the parallel sides. D is also fine. So let's move on to E. In E, one side of the square and one side of the pentagon, they're both parallel to each other, but you do not have an O shape next to the parallel sides. Instead, you have an O shape away from the parallel sides. Because you have an O shape away from the parallel sides and not next to the parallel sides, you can go ahead and cross off E. So out of the 5 options we started with, we managed to cross off A and E. So we're now left with B, C, and D. So once we have managed to get rid of the options with obvious errors, we will then have to rotate each of the remaining options in our head to find the answer. So let's start with B. And if you rotate B, you can see that B is very similar and it's exactly the same as the question figure, but let's check the others just to be sure that B is right. So let's leave B for now and let's move to C. And let's rotate C. And when you rotate C, you can see that C is a mirror image of the question figure. Because if you notice, in C, the O shape is on the bottom left of the square, but over in the question figure, it's on the bottom right of the square. So therefore, C is not right and you can cross off C. And let's move to D. And in D, if you rotate it once again, you could see that D is also a mirror image. because in D, the O shape's on the bottom left of the square and the question figure is actually on the bottom right. So therefore, you can also cross out D. So that means we're left with B, so our answer to this question will be B. In this video, you will learn 11 plus non-verbal reasoning type 12, hidden shapes. Welcome to another video. If this is your first time here and you want to master 11 plus exam techniques to land in your dream grammar school, start right now by subscribing and clicking on the bell so you don't miss anything. Now let's have a look at this example, and in this example we have a shape, and this shape has been hidden in one of the options below. We need to find which one of these options has the hidden shape. Also, this shape we have right here can be rotated when it has been hidden, but it cannot be reflected. So if we do find an option in which this shape has been reflected, then we cross the option off. So let's start by finding a feature in this shape that could help us find our answer. So now, if you have a look at this shape, in this shape you may notice that we have a V shape at the end of this shape. So we have a V shape right here. And all we're going to do is we're going to use this V shape to try to find where the original shape is. And once we find that shape, and if it's just as the same as the one we have over here, that means that will be our answer. So we're going to start by finding the V shape. Once we find the V shape, we're going to see whether the top bit of the shape is also the same, and if it is, that will be our answer. So let's start with A. In A, the only V shape that's similar to the one we have is this one we have right here. So this V shape is the most similar one to the one we have. But in this V shape, the top bit of the shape is not the same, because the top bit of the shape just goes down and goes up. It's pretty much like in an arrowhead shape, and an arrowhead shape is not as same as the one we have. Since it's a different shape, we can cross off A. And let's move into B. So in B, you can see that we have a V shape right here, and with this V shape, you may notice that this V shape is exactly like the one. But let's see whether the top bit of the shape is the same. So we have the V shape, and then we have the line going across, line at the top, line coming downwards. Yes, the top bit of the shape is also the same, but if you notice, this shape is a reflection of the shape we have above. It's not a rotation, and as we said before, rotations, if the shape is rotated, then it's fine, but if it is reflected, then we can cross the option off. As soon as the shape is reflected, it's not the same shape, which means we cross off B as well. So now let's move to C. We have three options left, C, D, and E. Let's start at C. In C, we cannot find the same V shape as this one. The only V shape that we can find that is anywhere near close is this one we have right here. And even this V shape is a bit more wider than the one we have at the top, which means we can cross off C as well. So now we're left with two options, D and E. So let's go on to D. In D, we have the V shape. So the V shape is right, and then we have the line going upwards, coming down, and then going diagonally. And if you notice, this shape we have right here is just as the same we have on the top. It's very similar to the one on the top, so this means this must be our answer, but let's check E just to be sure. In E, if you notice, we cannot find another V shape that's very similar to the one we have. The only V shape that we can find anywhere near is the one we have right here. So this is the only V shape that we can find. And even this V shape makes into an arrowhead shape. And an arrowhead is not the same as the one we have above. So therefore, we can also cross off E. So we're now left with D. Out of the 5 options we started with, we're now only left with D. So that means our answer to this question is going to be D. In this video, you will learn 11 plus non-verbal reasoning type 12, hidden shapes. Welcome to another video. If this is your first time here and you want to master 11 plus exam techniques to land in your dream grammar school, start right now by subscribing and clicking on the bell so you don't miss anything. Now let's have a look at this example, and in this example we have a shape, and this shape has been hidden in one of the options below. We need to find which one of these options has the hidden shape. Also, this shape can be rotated when it is hidden, but it cannot be reflected. So if we do find an option in which this shape has been reflected, then we cross the option off. So let's start off by finding a feature in this shape that could help us find our answer. So in this shape, you can see that we have a W shape at the end of the shape. We have one right here. So we have a W shape right here, and all we're going to do is we're going to look for this W shape in each of the option, and if we do find the W shape, then we're going to work our way upwards, and if the shape is the same, that means that will be our answer. So let's start with A. In A, the only W shape that we can actually see is the one we have right here. And if you notice, with this W shape, if you move your way upwards, you can see that this W shape doesn't actually make a shape that looks anything like the one we have right here. So therefore, it's a different shape, and which means we can cross off A. So we're left with 4 options. Let's move to B. In B, we can't really find a W shape, so therefore we can go ahead and cross off B straight away. Let's move to C. In C, we can find a W shape, and we can find one right here. And if you do make your way upwards, you can see that this shape is very similar to the one we have on the above. The only difference with this shape is that it has been rotated. And we said that rotated shapes are allowed. It's only that reflected shapes cannot be allowed. Since a shape is rotated, it is fine. But let's check D and E just to be sure that C is our answer. So let's start with D. In D, we have another W shape. We can see one right here, but if you notice, the W shape goes like this if you go your way upwards, and this shape is nothing like the one we have at the top, so therefore we can also cross off D. So now we're left with E and C. Let's check E. In E, we do have a W shape. We have one right here, and if you work your way upwards, you can see that this shape is very similar to this one, but the difference with this shape is that it has been reflected, and as we said before, if a shape is reflected, it's not right. So therefore, we'll have to cross out E. So now we're only left with one option, and that option is C. So this means our answer to this question is C. In this video, you will learn 11 plus nonverbal reasoning type 13, fold along the line. Welcome to another video. If this is your first time here and you want to master 11 plus exam techniques to land in your dream grammar school, start right now by subscribing and clicking on the bell so you don't miss anything. Now let's have a look at this example. And in this example, we have a piece of paper, and this paper has been folded along this fold line. So our job is to find how this paper would look like once it has been folded along this fold line. And we need to find whether it's A, B, C, or D. If you notice, the fold line is going vertical through this paper. So now, since we know how the paper has been folded, it has been folded vertically, we have to find the direction in which the paper has been folded. If you notice in A, B, C, and D, you can see that these two flaps we have right here appear to be on the other side of the fold line. So it's always on the left-hand side of the fold line. So this means the folds are being folded like this. So these two flaps we have right here are folded from right to left, because that's why they appear on the other side of the fold line. Since we now know the direction in which the paper has been folded, we can now start by eliminating the options that won't be the answer. If you have a look at both of these flaps, you can see that they're both the same size. They're both the same length. Because they're both the same length, if we find an option which both of these flaps are different length to each other, then we cross the option off. So if you have a look at an A, you can see that the bottom one is a bit longer than the top one. So this means they're different length, which means we can cross off A. So let's move to B. In B, you can see that the bottom one is a bit shorter than the top one. So this means they're different length, which means we can cross off B as well. If you have a look in C, you can see that these both are the same length and the same size. So that means we can keep C for now. And let's move to D. In D, you can see that these two are the same length again. So this means out of the 4 options we started with, we managed to cross off A and B. So now we're left with C and D. And to find the answer now, we just have to use our common sense. If you have a look at both of these flaps we have right here, and if you fold these flaps over, you can kind of see that the paper is not going to be too small, but at the same time, it's not going to be bigger than this one. But if you have a look in C, these two flaps we have right here, once they're folded, are way too small. So that means that cannot be our answer. Because if you do fold these two papers over, they would definitely won't be this small. But if you have a look in D, you can see that this size is a bit more reasonable to this one, because once the paper has been folded, obviously this flap is obviously going to get smaller, but it's not going to get too small. So this means our answer to this question is D. If you guys do want more resources, I've got the link in the description, so go check that out. Now, let's have a look at this example. And in this example, we have this paper being folded diagonally along these 2 points. It's crossing these 2 points and it's going diagonally. So we need to find whether the answer is going to be A, B, C, or D. And as you guys could see, because the paper has been folded diagonally like this, it means the paper must have a diagonal edge right here. It must have a diagonal edge right here. Because it's folded like this, it will definitely have a diagonal edge. So this means if you don't find an option in which there isn't a single diagonal edge in the option, then we cross the option off. In A, we have one diagonal edge, so A is fine, and we can move into B. In B, we do not have a single diagonal edge. So this means we can go ahead and cross off B. So let's move into C. In C, we still have a diagonal edge, and in D, we have a diagonal edge. But if you have a look at the direction in the diagonal is, you can see that the fold is going this way. It's going from the bottom left to the top right. So this means there must be a diagonal edge like this. But instead, there's a diagonal edge in the opposite way in D. Because the diagonal edge is in the opposite direction and is pointing the wrong side, you can go ahead and cross off D. So now we're left with A and C. Some of you may be able to find the answer, what it is right now, because if you have a look at this piece of the paper we have right here, you can see that it has a flat edge. And in A, this piece is right here, and in A, it also has a flat edge. But over in C, it does not have a flat edge, and instead, it has a diagonal edge. Because it has a diagonal edge and not a flat edge, you can cross off C. So now we're only left with A, but let's just check A to be sure. We said that we must have a diagonal edge. There is one right here. We talked about the direction being from the bottom left to the top right, and yes it is, bottom left to the top right. And we said that this bit of the paper sticking out must have a flat edge, and yes it does. So this means our answer to this question is A. In this video, you will learn 11 plus nonverbal reasoning type 14, 3D rotations. Welcome to another video. If this is your first time here, and you want to master 11 plus exam techniques to land in your dream grammar school, start right now by subscribing and clicking on the bell so you don't miss anything. Now, let's have a look at the 3D rotation example. And in this example, what we have to do is that we need to find which one of these shapes inside the box has been rotated to form the two new 3D figures. And as you guys could see, we have two examples. We have example 1 and example 2. So let's start with example 1 first. The thing to notice with this 3D figure is that we have three cuboids. We have a cuboid here, and a final cuboid at the top. We have three cuboids. What this means is that if we find an option that does not contain three cuboids, then we cross the option off. So let's start with A. In A, we can find a cuboid here, and another cuboid right here. So in A, we can find three cuboids, so therefore we can leave A as it is. In B, we can find a cuboid here and another one here. We can only find two cuboids in B and not three, and because of that, we're going to cross out B. Let's move to C. In C, we can find a cuboid here and another one here. We can only find two cuboids in C, which means it is not the same as 3, and therefore we can cross out C as well. What about D? Does D have three cuboids? In D, we have a cuboid here, a second cuboid, and the third cuboid. Because we have three cuboids in D, D is fine, and we can now move into E. In E, we have two cuboids. We have a cuboid here and another one here. Because we only have two cuboids, we have to cross out E as well. So let's move into F. In F, we can find all three cuboids. We can find a cuboid here, another one here, and a final one here. Because we had three cuboids in F, leave F as it is. So out of the 6 options we started with, we've managed to cross out B, C, E, and we're now left with A, D, F. So we need to find which one is the correct answer out of A, D, and F. The thing to notice with this 3D figure is that if you have a look at all of the cuboids, out of the 3 cuboids, you can see that 2 of them are vertical. You can see that 2 of the cuboids are vertical, but the other one is horizontal. So what does this mean? If we find an option in which that does not contain 2 cuboids that are vertical and 1 that is horizontal, then we cross the option off. So let's have a look at A. In A, we can find 2 of the cuboids, which are vertical, and we can also find one of them that is obviously horizontal, which is the right thing. So therefore, we can leave A, because 2 vertical cuboids and 1 horizontal cuboid is what we are looking for. Now let's move to D. In D, we have only 1 vertical cuboid. We only have 1 vertical cuboid in D and not 2, which means we have to cross out D. So let's move into F. Let's have a look at F. Just like in D, we only have 1 vertical cuboid. Because we only have 1 vertical cuboid and not 2, we're going to cross out F as well. So now we're only left with one option, which is A. So therefore, our answer to this question is A. Now, let's have a look at the second example. And with this 3D figure, as you guys could see that we have 2 cuboids. We have one here, another cuboid here, but we also have 2 cubes. So we have 2 cuboids and 2 cubes. So if we find an option that does not contain 2 cubes and 2 cuboids, let's cross the option off. In A, you can straight away see that we only have 1 cube, which is not the correct number, so cross out A. Let's move to B. In B, you can find 2 cubes, one here and another one here, and you can also find 2 cuboids, 2 right here. B is fine. Let's move to C. In C, you can once again find 2 cuboids, and you can also find 2 cubes. So C is fine. Leave C as it is. Move on to D. In D, we can straight away see that it only contains 1 cube. Because it only contains 1 cube, cross out D, since it's not the correct number. Let's move to E. In E, we have 1 cuboid, 2 cuboid, 1 cube, 2 cube. We have 2 cuboids and 2 cube, so E can stay as it is. Let's move into F. Just like the other 2 we crossed out, straight away you can see that this one only contains 1 cube. Since that's not the correct number of cubes, we can cross out F as well. So after the 6 options we started with, we're now left with B, C, and E. You guys could see that both of these cuboids are roughly the same length. This cuboid and obviously this cuboid are the same length. And because both of these cuboids are the same length, if we find an option in which the cuboids are different lengths, let's cross the option off. So let's start with B. In B, as you guys could see, you can straight away see that this cuboid is definitely larger than this cuboid. Because one of the cuboid is larger than the other cuboid and not the same length, cross out B. So let's move to C. In C, we can find both of these cuboids the same length, which is obviously the right thing. So C is fine, leave as it is. Let's move to E. In E, we can find that both of these cuboids are the same length. Because they're the same length, leave E as it is as well. So we're still left with C and E. The thing, if you notice with C, is that you can see that both of the cuboids are next to each other. This cuboid and this cuboid are right next to each other. But if you have a look at the actual 3D figure, you can see that one of the cuboid is actually stacked on top of the other cuboid. This cuboid is stacked on top of this cuboid. However, in C, they're just next to each other and they're not stacked on top of each other. Because they're not stacked on top of each other, let's cross out C. So we're left with E, so E must be our answer, but just to be sure E is our answer, let's check it anyway. In E, both of the cuboids are stacked on top of each other. This cuboid we have right here is obviously underneath this cuboid, so they're stacked. So therefore, our answer to this question is E. In this video, you will learn 11 plus non-verbal reasoning type 15, complete the shape. Welcome to another video. If this is your first time here and you want to master 11 plus exam techniques to land in your dream grammar school, start right now by subscribing and clicking on the bell so you don't miss anything. Now, let's have a look at a complete the shape example. In these types of examples, we need to find the answer without rotating the figure on the left, work out which option fits onto it to make the 3D shape. In other words, without rotating this figure on the left, we need to work out which one of these options fits into it to make the 3D shape. And to find the answer for these types of examples, the first thing we need to do is to find all of the cubes we have on this figure, and we're going to shade them off on the 3D shape. So all of the cubes we have right here, you can just shade them off the 3D shape. The first thing, as you guys could see, we can find 4 shapes straight away. We can find 4 cubes right here, forming a square shape. And if you're wondering where they are, well, those 4 shapes are these ones right here. And we're going to shade them off. So shade the 4 shapes off. We're going to shade them because it will tell us which ones we're left with, and that will be helpful to find our answer. So once you have shaded the ones you have found, we still have 2 more. We have one here and another one right here. We have 2 cubes left. So this one right here is basically this one over here. So shade that one. And the other one we had a look at, which is this one right here. So shade that one as well. Once you've done that, you're going to be left with a certain number of cubes. To be precise, we're left with 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We're left with 5 cubes. So because we're left with 5 cubes, our answer must also be 5 cubes. Because if you think about it, we need to find the answer by working out which option fits onto it to make the 3D shape. Which one of these options fits onto this shape to make the 3D shape. And the number of cubes we do not have is 5, which means we need to add 5 cubes to this option to get to this 3D shape. And therefore, our answer must also have 5 cubes in order to do that. In A, we only have 4 cubes. We have one right here, a second, a third, and a fourth. We only have 4 cubes, which is not the right number. So cross out A. The next thing, you're going to move on to B. In B, you have 1 cube, 2 cube, and a third cube. You only have 3 cubes, which is not the right number. Cross out B as well. In C, you have 1 cube, 2 cube, 3, 4, and 5. You have 5 cubes in C. So leave C as it is, which is the correct number. Now move on to D. In D, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We have 5 cubes, which is the correct number as well. So leave D as it is as well. So now we're left with C and D. We need to find another difference that could help us find the answer between C and D. And if you notice, the number of cubes we're left with look more similar to D than they look to C, which means our answer must be D. Another way of looking at this is that if you notice, we have 4 cubes forming a square shape. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. We have all 4 of these cubes forming some sort of a square shape right here. And in C, we do not have any sort of square shape. So that means cross out C. We're only left with D, but let's check D just to be sure. And D does have a square shape. It has one right here. We're left with D, and D ticks all the criteria, which means our answer will be also D.
Now, let's have a look at a clock movements example. In these types of questions, the first thing we have to do is to have a look at the types of hands we have in the clock. In this example, we have 2 types of hands. We have arrow and a square with its middle not being filled. So let's start with one of the hands first. The first one we're going to have a look at is the arrow. The arrow is first pointing towards the 3 in the first diagram. The second diagram, it's pointing towards 2. In the third, it is 1. In the fourth diagram, it is pointing towards 12. And the final diagram, the fifth one, it's pointing towards 11. Now we have to find what we have to do to the number on the left to get the number on the right. To get from 3 to 2, we have to take away 1. To get from 2 to 1, we have to take away 1. To get from 1 to 12, you have to take away 1 again. Because in a clock, if you're taking away 1, you're moving one number back in the clock. Which means if you're taking away 1 from 1, you're moving one number back, so therefore you get 12. And to get from 12 to 11, you do take away 1. Now, you can see the pattern is to take away 1. So which means to find where the arrow points in our answer, we have to do -1. And 11 minus 1 will give us 10. So if we find an answer figure where the arrow is not pointing towards a 10, then we cross the option off. So let's start with A. In A, the arrow is pointing towards 8. It is not 10, and therefore cross out A. In B, the arrow is pointing towards 1. That's not 10 either, so cross out B as well. In C, the arrow is pointing towards 10. Since it's pointing towards 10, we can leave C as it is. In D, the arrow is also pointing towards 10. So we can leave C and D as it is, and we have crossed out A and B. So we are left with 2 options. Now, to find the answer, we have to look at the hand with the square. In the first diagram, it is pointing towards 10. In the second diagram, it is 12. In the third, it is 2. In the fourth, it is 4. And in the fifth one, it is pointing towards 6. So once again, what do we have to do to the number on the left to get the number on the right? To get from 10 to 12, we have to add 2. To get from 12 to 2, we have to add 2. Because in a clock, if you're adding, you're moving one step forward. So if you're adding 2 to 12, you're moving 2 steps from 12, and you're moving those 2 steps forward. So that means you land at 2. And to get from 2 to 4, you're going to add 2. To get from 4 to 6, you have to add 2 once again. So this means to find out where the square is pointing in our answer, we have to add 2 to the 6. And 6 plus 2 will give us 8. So this means in our answer, the square must point towards 8. In C, the square points towards 8, whereas in D, it points towards 4. And therefore, we can cross out D, and which means our answer will be C. Now, let's have a look at a clock movements example. So in these types of examples, the first thing we have to do is to have a look at the types of hands we have. So in this example, we have 3 types of hands. We have an arrow, a circle with its middle not being filled, and a star. So these are the 3 types of hands we have. So let's start with one hand first. So let's start with the arrow first. The arrow in the first diagram is pointing towards 1. The second, it is pointing towards 2. The third, it is pointing towards 3. In the fourth diagram, it is pointing towards 4. And in the fifth diagram, it is pointing towards 5. Now, we have to have a look at what do we have to do to the number on the left to get the number on the right. So we have to add 1 to 1 to get 2. To get from 2 to 3, we have to add 1. To get from 3 to 4, add 1. To get from 4 to 5, add 1 once again. So this means to find out which number our arrow points towards in the answer, we have to add 1 to the 5, which means we get 6. 5 plus 1 is 6. Now we have to have a look at the answer figures. In the answer figures, we have to have a look at where the arrow points towards. And if the arrow points towards to numbers that are not 6, then we cross those options off. So let's start with A. In A, the arrow is pointing towards 6, so therefore A is fine. In B, the arrow is pointing towards 6, so B is also fine. In C, the arrow is pointing towards 8, and it's not pointing towards 6, and therefore it's the wrong number and we have to cross C out. In D, the arrow is also pointing towards 6, so D is also fine. So let's move on to the next hand, which is a circle with its middle not being filled. The first diagram, the circle points towards 6. The second diagram, it points towards 8. The third diagram, it points towards 10. In the fourth diagram, it points towards 12. And in the fifth diagram, it points towards 2. To get from 6 to 8, we have to add 2. To get from 8 to 10, we have to add 2. To get from 10 to 12, we have to add 2. And to get from 12 to 2, we also have to add 2. Because in clock movements, when you're adding, you're moving forward. So which means you're adding 2 to 12, you're moving 2 steps forward from 12, which means you land on 2. And to get from 2 to our answer, we also have to add 2, as you guys could see from the pattern. So 2 plus 2 will be 4. So that means if we find an option in which the circle is not pointing towards 4, then we cross the option off. In A, the circle is pointing towards 4. In B, it is pointing towards 3. And therefore, we can cross B out. In D, the circle is pointing towards 4 once again. So D and A are fine since the circle is pointing towards 4. Now, to find the answer, we have to look at the arrow with the star. The first diagram, it is pointing towards 8. The second diagram, it is pointing towards 3. In the third diagram, it is 11. In the fourth diagram, it is pointing towards 8. In the fifth diagram, it is pointing towards 6. So what do we have to do to the number on the left to get to the number on the right? To get from 8 to 3, we have to take away 5. To get from 3 to 11, we have to take away 4. Because if you guys remember, when we are adding, we are moving forward. So that means when you're subtracting, you're moving backwards. So if you're subtracting 4 from 3, you're moving 4 steps back from 3. So you're going through 2, 1, and then 12, and then 11. To get from 11 to 8, you have to take away 3. To get from 8 to 6, you have to take away 2. So if you guys notice the pattern, each time you have to do 1 less than the previous step. So first time you had to do -5, then the second time you only had to do -4. Then the third time you had to do -3, and the fourth time you have to take away 2. So which means, to find our answer, if we follow this pattern, we have to take away 1 from 6. So 6 minus 1 will give us 5. So this means out of A and D, we have to find out which is the right answer. And we have to find out which of the stars point to 5. And as you guys could see, A points to 5, whereas D points to 10. And therefore, we can cross out D and we can choose our answer, which is A. And that means our answer to this question is A.